Hey guys, this is Gamer Cow. Welcome to another Pokemon trading card game history discussion video thing. We're on to our third set now for the 2008 format, which is Great Encounters. And yeah, this set's got at least one amazing card that changes a whole lot of stuff here. A lot of cool things in here, so definitely a lot to discuss. First off, hopefully everybody enjoyed the Worlds thing. I wasn't at the Worlds format, unfortunately, which is a real shame being in London, right? That's, you know, oh, it's so close. It's not really close at all, but yeah, I watched pretty much all of it. It was a huge event this year, so that's mostly why we didn't play last week, because we wanted to just absorb it all. 2022 format is actually really cool, even though, you know, there's a lot of Palkia and such, but it's like super cool to watch. So yeah, we kind of collectively all wanted to watch the Worlds format stuff, so that's why we didn't play. And then the other bit I wanted to note is I apologize if the resolution of this makes it a bit harder to watch now. My computer's on its last legs, I'll be totally honest with you. There's been a lot of frame drops and things as we've been going through streams, and most of them are unfortunately attributed to the computer, not the internet or anything. And even if they were from the internet, it's mostly the fact that the computer's not as good at connecting to it as it should be now, because this thing's 11 years old. So, yeah, it's something I'm gonna be starting to work on, but yeah, I don't know how we're gonna finance that yet, but that's not really the point. The point here is to talk about Pokemon cards, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. We technically have some promos in this one, but there's nothing new here per se. These are all either reprint cards or cards we're just about to talk about, but they have some really cool alt arts, right? My Ampharos over here just looks really nice. The Mareep is super happy as well. The Gallade, I think, just looks better than the regular Gallade from last set, as does the Cresselia. I should really start using this Cresselia, because the other one's cool, but this is just very nice. Dancing in the Moonlight. And then we got ones like the Startler over here, which probably isn't going to see as much play anymore because Pachirisu just kind of outclasses it as a lead, but we will see. Morphin is another one that's in this set that we'll talk about. So, yeah. Also, Routes is hiding from the raid. It's really cute. So yeah, let's go over the trainer cards first, because once again there are very few of them in this set, so we might as well start there. Amulet Coin, and by extension Leftovers, are two new tools which are both very underwhelming, but maybe could see play in exactly a deck that requires Castaway, but either doesn't use Cessation Crystal, or obviously can't use it because we banned it. Oh, it's a pretty good reason not to use it, right? They both activate at the end of your turn if they're attached to the active Pokemon. Leftovers will heal 1 damage counter. Admittedly, we don't have a lot of healing at the moment, so that could be a relevant number. And Amulet Coin draws a card. Drawing a card at the end of the turn is obviously not amazing, but doing so at the very least would force the opponent to disrupt you if they want to remove the tool from your hand, right? So I could see some use for it. Castaway is a strong engine, being able to get another supporter, plus a basic energy, plus the tool, but I don't know if it's good enough to see this sort of play, right? It's kind of weird. I don't think I've ever seen a deck list with it, so it's probably not very good. Felicity's Drawing is going to be the next good draw supporter, maybe not so much with Steven's Advice in the format, but if you do need to discard cards out of your hand, this is still an excellent way of doing it. Just like Juggler from the past, you discard up to 2 cards in your hand, except this is any card, not just basic energy. If you discard 1 card, you draw 3, just like Juggler used to. If you discard 2 cards, you draw 4, which is weaker than Juggler's draw 5, but again, you don't have to have basic energy specifically in the hand, so this works in any deck. And also, draw 4 is the strongest single draw count that we have in the format at the moment. So yeah, outside of Steven's Advice, which is situational, admittedly better at the moment because of this guy, but once Steven's Advice leaves, this will be the strongest raw draw that we have, so definitely keep an eye on it. It's probably going to be good. Moonlight Stadium is going to replace Phoebe Stadium in a lot of decks. the retreat cost of each Psychic and Dark Pokemon, which is the main theme of this set, I suppose, they become 0. So that's kind of neat. You get access to, yeah, 3 retreating Darkrai's and Cresselias and stuff. They don't have a huge retreat cost, but stuff that does have a huge retreat cost, like Dusknoir, can take good advantage of this, right? It's got a 3 energy cost to retreat, which is way too fat. So, also Weavile from the previous set can turn your Pokemon Dark for the turn, your active Dark, like, once. So that can even turn something with a gigantic 4 retreat cost like Snorlax into something that that you can get out the active, which is really good. Level X's do get a boost in this set as well. Primary Ball just searches your deck or discard pile. I keep forgetting about this bit. You can search your discard pile for a Level X as well. Show it to the opponent, put it into the hand. So not only can this recover them, but you can search them out in the deck as well. Fantastic card. I need to remember the discard bit because I do have Level X's in some of my decks this week. So yeah, super good stuff. The Level X's in this set are all worth talking about as well. We'll go over Palkia and Dialga first though, because the actual cards in this set for them are the same as what we had before, just with a different artwork. So we'll go over those first because they don't really fit into a normal discussion here. Dialga Level X is something Pika wants me to play like into the Heart Gold Soul Silver era. Apparently this card stays illegal for years, it's crazy. This whole format stays legal for a long time, but this especially because it gets printed even after Majestic Dawn on format. Silly. Anyway, Time Skip lets you make the opponent flip 2 coins. If they're both heads, your turn immediately ends, which obviously is pretty awful. But if your opponent flips 2 tails, they don't get a turn. When their next turn happens, they draw a card and it immediately ends. And I think the idea is that you just endlessly skip the opponent's turn while knocking them out with something like the Cresselia that we'll talk about later on. It's very silly. This actual attack is really bad, like Metal Flash 2, yeah sure, 80 damage to 4, actually kind of good on effectively a stage 1, right? But it's just not good enough, and yeah, we don't really have a strong enough attack to use otherwise right now, although having said that, there is going to be another Dialga coming out next set that you could maybe attack with. But how are you getting 4 energy on this thing? I don't know. It's too tough right now. Palkia Level X is significantly more powerful right now. This card is probably going to see play at the weekend. It lets you force the opponent to make you switch, and then you force them to switch. It's like Double Gust, but it's on a Pokemon that you can just use all the time, and you don't even have to have this active to use it either. Granted, it's probably going to be dragged up if it's not the active because it's got the fattest retreat cost out of all you guys, but you could work with that. I think I just need to build decks with a higher switch count to take advantage of this thing, so that you effectively do have Gusting, because Gusting is not really in this format, right? We have Warp Point, and that's almost it, like Cyclone Energy, sure, but all of these give the opponent the choice of what you bring up. This lets you target down their Claydol and kill it, which is super important. Its actual attack is decent. I've been trying to use this in the Swampert deck, which hasn't really panned out very well, but we will talk about that as we go. But its attack is fine, 3 water energy to do 60, and you can choose to move all the energy from Palkia to your bench Pokemon in any way that you like. So that's kind of good. It does have 120 HP itself as well, so it will survive almost every attack. So, you know, and then when it isn't going to survive, you can move the energy to the bench and it's all pretty good. 60 damage isn't super great, but again, it's evolving from a basic, so you kind of do need to keep that in mind. It's respectable. Let's start talking about the set in proper though. Starting with Blaziken, I've tried this card. The payout is not quite strong enough for being a stage 2 with a lot of setup, despite having in-engine acceleration as well in Firestarter. But let's just see why. It does 80 damage by discarding 2 fire. It snipes that 80 damage. It's like fire, colorless. It's obviously going to be really good at taking out Claydol at 80 HP, and any other sort of bench sitter tends to be around that mark. So yeah, it's really good at killing stuff that way. But it doesn't deal with the active. An 80 discard 2, like, that's just nowhere near strong enough. but it's also a stage 2, so it has to be the primary focus of your deck as well. So you don't really have space to do secondary attackers and stuff here. Honestly, this is why Magmortar was played and not this kind of thing, even though Magmortar doesn't have the inbuilt acceleration, because it just doesn't do enough. Fire Dance is a good attack though. Like, I used this with Delta Salamence and then it cost a Fire in the colors to do that 30. So it's got decent traits, it's just there's no end payoff. If there was a Blaziken like level X, I know there's a Blaziken EX, but that gives up 2 prizes and does some self damage, so it's not that great. If there was a level X, you could probably do some really good work with this actually, but as it stands it just doesn't have the single target focus that it needs or the single attack on the active that's good enough to justify it. Cresselia, it only gets 1 card for some reason, but it's a passable one. 80 HP is pretty solid on a basic level up in Pokemon, I suppose. Moon Twinkle's not amazing, but you might use it on occasion to chip off the last bit of health and heal some damage. 1 colorless to do 10 if there's a Stadium in play, heal 20, sure. Luna Dance, 2 Psychic and a colorless to do 50 is not impressive, but if you discard 2 energy on the crest, you full heal one of your bench Pokemon. Something we do not really have any access to right now. Remember, Mr. Briney's rotated on the last set, so, or last, rotation. So, there's a lot of utility in that, and we probably will take advantage of that at some point. Cresselia level X gains an extra 20 HP, does make its weakness times 2 to Psychic instead of plus 20, but that's fine, it's not that important. Full Moon Dance is really good though, and this is why you'll probably see a fair bit of this card as we go forward. Full Moon Dance's Shady move, where you can move 1 damage counter from any Pokemon to any other Pokemon. But it doesn't have to be active in order to use that power. You just have to be active to level up, but once you've leveled up, it's fine, you can use it from anywhere. Which is really good alongside Moonskip, that's a very expensive 2 Psychic and the colors to do just 40 damage, but if you KO with this attack, you take an extra prize. So 2 prizes on a regular Pokemon, 3 on an EX if you're lucky enough to KO with that. So, wild attack on that. Definitely something worth using. Darkrai, for some reason, gets 2 cards in this set, and one of them is specific to bullying Cresselia. 3 Darkness Energy, 50 damage. If the opponent is Cresselia, it does 100, so just literally KOs that and nothing else. I don't like this one too much though, because it's only got 70 HP, and its first attack is fine for no energy. Search your deck for any energy card, put it into hand, but it's definitely not where you want to be, and the fact if you can't attack for less than 3 energy, not great in the slightest. Darkrai the second has 80 HP, which is better, obviously, and you do 1 colorless energy to do 10 damage, and you can force the opponent to switch. You don't even have to make them switch, which is surprisingly good actually. So that's pretty slick. Just being able to do that little bit, 20 damage with a special dark energy attached on the first turn, not bad. Sleep Hole is actually a build around attack. 2 dark and a colorless to do 40 plus sleep is again very unimpressive even on a basic. But if the opponent is already asleep, it does 80 instead. This is on a dark Pokemon, so this damage can rack up. You can do 60, 70 with this thing as a base, which is pretty good. But yeah, you could do like 110 damage if you force sleep on them, which there is a way of doing. We will get to that later. The Darkrai level X, however, has got a massive amount of potential. I don't think I've ever seen any decks with this, and playing this week I can kind of see why. We're probably going to see it at the weekend why as well, but it's got a lot of potential here. Dark Shadow as a body turns all of your basic dark energy on your dark Pokemon into special energy by effect. So you gain damage buffs just by attaching basic dark energy to your dark Pokemon. So suddenly this 2 dark and a colors for 40 damage that really doesn't look very good is actually 3 energy for 70, which is not bad. It's slightly below what you would want, but it's really close, and you could still attach extra energy to buff up this damage even further, which is great. Endless Darkness is a bitch of an attack, however, because yeah, it only does 40, and it only auto sleeps, so it's the same sort of thing as Sleep Hole here, but the opponent has to flip 2 heads in order to wake up, and if they flip 2 tails instead, they die. Yeah, Endless Darkness is the right thing for this instead. They get KO'd if they flip 2 tails between turns, which sometimes actually might be a detriment if they flip 2 tails going into their turn and get to switch into something that kills Darkrai. But, you know, that is the risk that you take. So, crazy good card. It disables a lot of things from being able to hit you. So, really solid stuff there. And, yeah. The build around is with Wigglytuff. We might as well just go over that now. Goodnight Melody makes both active Pokemon fall asleep. So, you might think that's bad because you can't actually do anything with that. I mean, you could just play Switch or something. But there is Sydney Stadium in Power Keepers that lets you make Dark Pokemon unable to become asleep, confused, or paralyzed. So you use the Wigglytuff alongside that, and potentially Weavile is the other thing that we've been playing, because Wigglytuff itself is a decent attacker. So you use the Weavile to turn it into a Dark type, it gets the damage buffs from Darkrai, or you just use it with the Darkrai having energy on it, and you can do 110 with that. The actual Wigglytuff does 2 for 40, which is not great, but if Igglybuff is anywhere under the thing, it does 60 instead. So then put the special Darkness and Weavile buff on it, it does 80 for 2, plus the sleep that it inflicts itself. It's actually pretty solid. The deck falls apart to one-shotting, but we'll see that at the weekend. Pachirisu is the next one up, and that is, funnily enough, one of the best cards of the set. Core for Family is exactly the same thing that Dunsparce did, and we remember how good that was from Sandstorm. Search your deck for up to 3 basic Pokemon, put them onto the bench. Really solid. Smash Short, as hard as it is to say, is actually really good as well though. 1 colorless to do just 10 is obviously pretty bad, but if the opponent has a Pokemon tool attached to them, it does 40, discards that tool, and then looks at the opponent's hand to discard any tools of the same name from there. It chain destructions. I mean, I guess it's more like chain disappearance, but like, it chain destructions the opponent's tool in their hand too. Really good against Cessation Crystal decks. This was one potential argument to bring Cess back this round, but I think we're going to see enough of it from the Majestic Dawn like full format thing to not have to deal with it this round. I think we'll be fine. But yeah, really good anti-Cess tech as well, which some decks, like the one I want to play this week, takes full advantage of. Porygon Z is an interesting card here. I think it's been a little bit underrated. I don't think it's too crazy good, but it has it's in the waiting room for its level X next set. But it does have some really good support within the engine too. Porygon 2 lets you discard a supporter once per turn from your hand in order to use the effect of that supporter as its power. So if you discard a Cilio's Network, you just search for any Pokemon. That in itself is ridiculous, and definitely something that is worth looking into. Maybe even as its own engine, but then its deck space or like bench space is probably the problem, right? But a lot of decks in this format are already playing a ton of supporter cards. You could easily justify playing like 18 plus supporters with this thing, and it's not even a hard once per turn. So if you get 2 Porygon out, you could use 3 supporters in the turn, 1 naturally plus the 2 you discard. Super good. Porygon Z itself does passable damage. 2 colorless to flip 3 coins and do 40 per the number of heads. You're expecting to get at least 1 heads with this, so yeah, it's not amazing, but it also kind of works with its conversion power, where you discard a basic energy from your hand and make Porygon Z the same type as that card. This effectively becomes like a corners deck with just itself, because you put a bunch of different basic energy into the deck. You maybe play something like Mr. Stone's Project right now in order to recover those energy, so you can discard them again, become the same type as the opponent is weak to, and then your 1 coin toss out of 3 becomes like 60 to 80 damage, right? You could even play, what was the card? It's not Lake Acuity, right? I forget which one, the Late Boundary, that's the one. From the previous like Mysterious Treasures that makes weakness times 2 instead, and then suddenly 1 coin gives you 80 damage, 2 coins gives you a one-shot and everything in the format, and that actually sounds really appealing. So yeah, there's definite scope for this to be good. Just a little bit luck based, but hey, we've played Executor in the past, we're not too afraid of that, right? Wait until next set, we'll probably test this out midweek during that, because there's some fun stuff it can do. Rotom is cool, but unfortunately this is not the good one. Again, wait until next set because there's a really good one there. But I just want to notice a lightning type that has the ghost typing in terms of weakness resistance, so that might matter. It's not weak to fighting, so that's kind of cool, I suppose. Telebeam could do a lot of damage if you flip heads, but good luck with that. Sceptile makes Torterra playable. It has Meganium, what was it? Neogenesis, the first set. It's got Meganium's Wild Growth, where any basic grass energy on your grass Pokemon provides 2 grass energy instead of 1. Leaf Blade, therefore, is a very expensive 2 grass, 2 colors, but technically it's only 2 energy because it counts itself in its power to do 50, and if you flip heads it does 70. At least it's front loaded, and so you do more damage on the first hit. Its attack is terrible, let's be honest, but its ability is great because it makes Torterra be able to do like 100 for 2, which is wild. So yeah, as the name implies, right? Wild Growth. Swampert, not so impressed with this card after playing it, but it's fine. Like, in theory, it makes a lot of sense, but I just don't think we have all the tools for it here. We need something like Pokemon Nursing format for this to be good. Washout lets you shift your water and fighting energy from your bench to your active as often as you like per turn. And then Hammer Arm, for a rather expensive 2 water, 2 colorless, does only 80 damage, but it does discard the top card of the opponent's deck, so a little bit of disruption there. It's in water, so it can synergize with Palkia. There's Suicune in the format as well, so that you can recover these from the discard. So there's some incidental synergies that make water quite good right now. It's also not weak to lightning, so it's not as easily targeted as the likes of Empoleon, because most anti-water decks right now are targeting the lightning weakness. So there's at least that, but it's just not quite there. 80 damage cap is not strong enough. It takes 4 energy to do so. Grumble, grumble, you know. It's just not quite there. Speaking of not quite there, in comparison to Torterra, Tangrowth just doesn't really stack up. Its second attack is functionally the same as like the Leaf Storm thing, except slightly better and slightly worse. 2 grass and 2 colorless to do 60, the same as Leaf Storm from base Torterra. You heal 30 from Tangrowth instead of 20 from all of your grass Pokemon, but it also stops the opponent retreating next turn. Once again, it's Sceptile Tangrowth is the idea here. Because, yeah, that's for 2 energy at that point, and that's actually respectable. 110 HP stage 1 too, so you're trying to weigh off the whole, like, getting a stage 1 in play versus getting a stage 2 / level X. It doesn't really work out in Tangrowth's favor here, though, unfortunately. Power Whip is a decent attack, though. It was errata, do not read card on the thing here. Choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, do 10 damage for each basic energy attached to Tangrowth. You might think that's going to take far too long to rack up because you need like 4 energy plus a Sceptile to do the 80, which goes on to Claydol. But do keep in mind there's the Energy Trans Sceptile in format as well, so if you build a dedicated Sceptile Tangrowth deck, you can have the option to move your energy around as well. So there are definitely times where this will be good, but I don't think it's quite there. It's just a little bit too clunky, a little bit too hard to get enough energy into play. It's a bit too much of a hog compared to the Torterra. It doesn't use Super Scoop Up quite as well, I don't think, because 110 is reachable. Not easy, but reachable. So, yeah, not quite as good. Togekiss is in the deck I want to play most this week. Serene Grace is kind of wild. When you evolve into the Togekiss, you look at the top 10 cards of your deck. Any basic energy you find there, you can bring out of the deck and attach them to your Pokemon however you choose. This is used with the Ho-Oh from the previous set to form the awesome Skittles deck that lets you Rainbow Burn for like 120 plus damage. It's crazy. Air Scroll itself is not amazing, but it can be serviceable in matchups where Ho-Oh is going to get slammed for weakness. You do 40 damage base for free energy of any kind, so it can power itself up fairly fast. If you flip heads, it does 70 instead. If you flip tails, it heals 30, so that can fix the map in some matchups. It's not a good attacker, but against the likes of Empoleon, you may need to soften stuff up with the Togekiss first, so it's passable. We're going to skip Altaria because it doesn't do anything, unfortunately. Beedrill, maybe not now, in even next set, potentially, with the Fione that resembles Make-A-Wish Jirachi. It's been, like, rumored, I suppose. Maybe Pepper will play it, but it won Worlds when the Search Beedrill came out later on, so keep an eye on this. It stays in format for quite a while. The reason it's good is because Band Attack for a single Grass Energy does 30 for every Beedrill you have in play. So it's hard to get that many Stage 2s in play normally, but there is a mountain of support that gets released for this later on, and it will get played, for sure. Butterfree isn't nearly as good, unfortunately, but I do kind of want to just very quickly mention it. Oh, also Zero Retreat on this thing too. I very quickly want to mention it because the Caterpie and the Metapod do have a power to, if you flip heads, unfortunately, and if it's in the active, unfortunately, if you flip the heads though, you get to just straight evolve this thing from the deck, which is pretty sweet. And both the Caterpie and the Metapod have that. And Butterfree's got a single energy attack, so if you just flipped a couple of heads on the first turn and got this up, you'd be able to do Parallel Drain amazing, you know, instantly, which is actually not a terrible attack. Like 30 for 1 is fine, right, as a basic move. And then you heal from one of your Pokemon the amount of damage that you did. It doesn't even just heal the Butterfree, so that's kind of cool. Anyway, we have the real doll of the room, I suppose. The real elephant here that's not actually an elephant in the slightest. Claydol is the thing that makes this format playable. Now, it's a draw until you have 6 cards in hand thing, which is already good. We saw this with Porygon and whatnot before. But in order to access this power, you have to put up to 2 cards from your hand to the bottom of your deck. You have to put at least 1, so you can't just draw until you have 6 on an empty hand. But this lets you put cards back, so you are drawing more. It puts them at the bottom of the deck, so you are not drawing those cards. It's actually insane. You can get away with, in this format, playing 0 draw supporters, so long as you have an out to the opponent's Success Crystal and stuff, right? We probably couldn't do that if God of War was still legal, because, yeah, Psychic Block or whatever, the power blocking attack, just Psychic Lock, that's the one, just kind of shuts this off, obviously, and then your whole deck is probably too slow or just not consistent enough to deal with that. But we banned that card because we don't want to see it again right now. So yeah, there's some huge potential for this thing to just run rampant. There aren't very many ways of shutting it off, and there aren't too many good ways of sniping it down either, because Empoleon and Magmortar are also banned. We could still play the Mysterious Treasures one to get to the level X to snipe, but that card is terrible, so I don't think anyone's going to do it. But maybe they will, just because this card is so good. I expect to see this in like every deck going forward. It's a celebrations card for a reason, and it's ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous cards for a slightly different reason, Exploud is super dumb, and if we had Success Crystal, this and the next card actually, if we had Cessation Crystal, would be very, very annoying in different decks. Ambient Noise is a dumb attack, the way that it's worded here. 2 colors to flip 2 coins. The separate results of these coins actually matter. If the first one is heads, it does 50 to the active, so 50 for 2, okay. Not amazing, but it's for any 2, so I suppose you can get away with it. If the first coin is tails though, it does 20 to each of the opponent's bench, which is actually a much better result for 2 colors energy. Likewise, the second coin has the same sort of stipulation. If the second coin even is heads, you confuse. So alright, 50 plus confusion. If you flip 2 heads, that's okay. If the second one is tails though, the opponent can't play any kind of trainer card during the next turn. Trainer, supporter, or stadium. What the actual hell? Why is that the tails effect? I thought flipping tails was supposed to be bad. I mean, surely I should just play this, right? Because I keep flipping tails all the time, so clearly this is like the best card in the format for me. But yeah, if you pair this with Cessation Crystals so the opponent can't play the Claydol stuff, yeah, it's very, very nasty. I could actually see Exploud Pidgeot being a deck that would get played this week. Maybe I should build that. I don't know. That would be very mean. But yeah, shut off powers and also shut off the stuff here. There's an Exploud EX in format as well, which still works as a direct attacker. So to get around the whole 4 colors for 70 thing that Hyper Voice is, because that's lame. Nobody wants to do that. Yeah, this card is really, really annoying, and maybe it does deserve play. I don't know. Houndoom is very resemblant of like the Dark Houndoom that we had before, which is pretty funny, you know. It's a Dark type that's not weak to fighting, so that's kind of good for your Dark stuff, right? It is weak to water though, so when Polion kind of shreds it, oh well. Dark Fang itself is actually respectable. 20 for a Dark Energy, which is 30 if you put a special on it, and just randomly discard a card from the opponent's hand. We saw how good Absol was last week. Granted, Absol can discard 2 cards, but this is doing damage, which Absol is not. So that's respectable. And then Black Fire for Fire Colors does 40, and this is where the Dark Houndoom thing comes in. If you can discard a Fire or a Dark on the Houndoom in order to use this attack. If you choose to discard a Fire, you do 40 plus burn. If you discard a Dark, you do 70 damage. So this is your quick attacking Cess deck, where if you've got Special Dark down, you do 80, plus the whole Cessation Crystal thing is pretty cool. I think you could use this with Darkrai though, so that your basic Darks can also do bonus damage here. Like, if you want to hit the 80 threshold, you need to have some sort of buff on this thing, right? And yeah, plus power is a temporary thing you can do, but if you put Darkrai down with this as well, Dark Fang suddenly becomes a lot more powerful as well. So there's probably something there. I don't know if it's good enough, but there's something there. We're going to skip a couple of these. I mean, Hypno is a funny Pokemon to work with the Wigglytuff. If the opponent is asleep, you shift all damage counters on the Hypno to the active Pokemon. There's not really any way of manipulating this sort of damage on it though, and it's only got 80 HP, so it's not surviving much. Kingler is miserable because if you KO the opponent with Scissor Blow, which isn't even that strong of an attack in the first place, it damages itself by a lot, so that's dumb. Just play Arcanine if you want that sort of thing. Lapras has got Castaway in an attack, which is solid. Again, like search for a tool, supporter, and basic energy. Problem is we don't have good tools at the moment, and it's locked into water. So it just pales in comparison to the other starters that we have in the format. Latias and Latios are reminiscent of the EX versions from the very first encounter with them in Dragon, because they do big damage and then discard 2, or in Latios' case 3 energy on this thing. It's kind of cool, right? Like, Fire Water Colors to do 80 on a basic is doable, but having to discard 2 energy every time is just a little bit too much for that. 80 is not a strong enough payout for that. 120 certainly is a strong enough payout, but it takes Grass Lightning, which is hard to accelerate, plus 2 colorless, and then it also discards 3 energy, which is not great. We would need Delta Dragonite, I think, in order to potentially make this usable, and even then, woof, I don't know. I love the idea of this card because 120 is the kind of payout number that you would want in this format, but I don't see any way that you can get the energy out consistently on this thing. So yeah, there's a Mawile in the format. It's kind of cool. 0 energy, flip a prize card face up. Very good against Gallade decks actually, because you reduce their damage output by flipping their prizes up, but it's not good enough to justify its in play. Milotic, I kind of want to apologize actually. I unfortunately did use the Feebas set early, because I used this in my, and the Water Energy for Fast Evolution actually. I used this in my Gardevoir deck, but oh well, it didn't really come into play, so it doesn't matter that much. The Milotic prevents a safeguard for level X's, so if we ever got into a format where level X was like the dominant thing, this could at least defend against him. Doesn't really do enough to justify it though. Twister is not the kind of attack you want on something like this, so yeah, not very good. Primeape is something I wouldn't be too surprised if a build around happens next set with Unknown P coming into format. Right now we've got like Jolteon Star and maybe Cress if you want to go down that route. Bit difficult to play, but if it's got any damage counters on it, it does 40 extra damage on its attacks. That instantly becomes 90 for 3 energy, which is very, very good. It does confuse itself every time it uses this attack, which is a bit annoying, but there are ways around that. And if heads, the opponent can't attack next turn with their active. They have to switch up. You're probably killing them, so this effect doesn't really matter, but that's kind of neat. Slowking is true to its name, a little bit too slow here. Its attack doesn't do anything, so it's all about the power. Trump card, if any of your Pokemon were KO'd during your opponent's last turn, search your deck for any card, put it into your hand. That's really cool, but it's on a stage 1. It requires you to be knocked out, so there's only so many times that can even happen. It's just not good. 80 HP is not strong enough either for that sort of thing, so yeah, we'll move on. Wailord gets a shout out because it's the first one prize Wailord that has 200 HP. There is a world where that's usable actually. Super Scoop Up is available. Its attack and ability stuff are really kind of bad. 3 water and the colors to do just 60, and if it's got any damage on it, it falls asleep. It does heal itself, admittedly, if it stays asleep, so that's kind of cool, but woof. Great artwork on this thing though, Mitsuhiro Rita getting another amazing card for it. I've heard rumours that this Weezing was played once or twice. Anytime between turns, players put one more damage counter on each of their poison Pokemon. So there are ways of establishing poison on the opponent's active without actually having to attack to do it. So yeah, okay, maybe at some point could be playable. And then I think that's mostly it. There's a couple of things that are worth noting. Let's just see. Pretty sure the cat turn is bad, right? Yeah, it doesn't do nearly enough. The Gorbis is kind of neat. Unfortunately, the Clamperl in this format has like 40 HP and garbage attacks, so not very good there. But Psychic Snap for Psychic and Water basically does 50 damage and Confusion, so like multi-energy would be pretty good for that. 50 plus Auto Confuse on something of 0 Retreat isn't terrible. This would be another sort of Cessation Crystal thing. Not like, probably not strong enough, but if you need water coverage in a Psychic deck, there are worse things you could do. Likewise, if you need water coverage in a Dart deck, well, you play Weavile, but if you for some reason want to play a Huntail, you could. 50 damage for Water Dark, and discard a special energy on the active Pokemon. That's okay. It's slightly bulkier as well, so maybe you survive a hit that Gorbis doesn't. I don't know. What else is there? There is a Relicanth here that searches for free training cards that have Fossil in their names. Show them to opponent, put them into hand. This will matter next set when we get the return of the Dome and the Helix Fossil. You could play it at the moment though if you really wanted to play a Rampardos deck. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could. And then, oh yeah, there is something else super important in here, Unknown G. Maybe not so good right now, but it will be good in the future because Machamp's Takeout is going to be super annoying later on. As long as you attach this, like if it's on the bench, you attach it to one of your Pokemon as a tool card, and as long as it's attached, it prevents all effects of attacks that aren't damage done to that Pokemon. I'm actually tempted to put this as a one-off in my Ho-Oh deck because I lost to Dusknoir in midweek stuff, because Dusknoir bypasses Phoenix turn, and this would pretty much hard counter that matchup, to be honest, so I might play it, just because. The Iggly buff in this set, we do have the one that reduces retreat cost of your Jiggly line by 1. Yes, I am keeping that as the thing. This one lets you draw 3 cards if you haven't played a supporter that turn though, for 0 energy, so this is a better starter, but personal preference, I know Sai was playing this one instead, so I'll mention it. Illumise, if you flip heads, you can search your deck for a grass basic Pokemon and bench it once per turn, so that's potentially good setup. I think it's a bit too flippy really, but it's potential setup for your grass decks. And that pairs with the Volbeat over here, where if you have an Illumise in play, you search your discard pile for a supporter card and top deck it. So yeah, it's kind of neat. It's a lot of bench space, but if you had Illumise, Volbeat, and Claydol down, you'd be able to acquire that supporter card via Claydol at that point, right? So yeah, that's okay, I suppose. And then the last thing I want to note here is the Solrock and the Lunatone. The Lunatone is seen play in decks that want to discard just by itself. You discard a card, and if you have a Solrock in play, you draw a card, but you don't have to have a Solrock in play to discard a card, so sometimes some decks like Burnett will actually want this effect just to discard, so really good for a basic. And then Knockover for any energy does 20 damage, discards a Stadium in play if you want to. So also really good, because you could use this in any deck that wants like the fighting coverage for cheap hits. So yeah, you could do like 30 or 40 to fighting weak stuff early on, which is not bad. The Soul Rock itself is also playable without the Lunatone. It's kind of neat that way. If you have Lunatone in play though, then your fighting and psychic Pokemon do not get impeded by resistance, which is good. And finally, Soul Charge is the reason I'm actually interested in this card. 1 fighting energy to do 20 damage, and you get a basic energy from your discard pile. Attach it to one of your bench Pokemon. This is like Landorus's Shout of Power in Gen 7. And honestly, that attack was really, really good. We just need efficient enough fighting attackers, and I think Lucario kind of fits that bill. So there might be something to it there. Overall, really interesting set with this. I've talked for a lot longer than I expected to on this one because there's just so much to go over. These sets are getting more and more interesting. I think Majestic Dawn is going to be even better in that aspect, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, there's a ton of good cards, a ton of interesting potential in here, a lot to experiment with. I have done quite a bit of it so far, and yeah, it's intriguing. We'll see what comes up out of the set, but look out for Darkrai and Cresselia especially, though. Those are the 2 main focuses of this set. They are very, very cool. So, thank you if you have stuck to the end of this for watching. Hopefully you have found it interesting, and we will reconvene at the weekend to see what decks come up. Right, take care.